In all these changes, the constant feature is the displacement of the original inhabitants of the island, the Lumad and the Moro populations. This is the historical and political economic context of their marginalization in favor of the dominant migrant populations. The Lumad and the Moro populations have historically been displaced in favor of migrant communities. These marginalizations has worsened with neoliberal policies promoting agricultural plantations, minings in Lumad ancestral domains. War of Extinction, where state forces including paramilitary groups violently suppressed Lumad resistance to land possession. The Lumad face relentless attacks on their schools, leaders, and communities. In 2015 alone, 87 indigenous schools were threatened with closure, with 3 shutting down under tragic circumstances, leaving over 1,000 children without education. Foreign-backed mining and agricultural expansions are prioritized over indigenous rights, leading to systematic violence and uprooting of nomad communities. Michelle Campos, 17 years old when a picture was taken, and she is a daughter of slain Lumad leader Lionel Campos, commenting on the murder of her father together with fellow Manobo leaders Belo Senzo and Emerito Samarca, the executive director of Al-Qaeda. She expresses in a mass action that the peace that the government wants is a peace of the graveyard so that mining interests can freely encroach in Manobo ancestral domain.
So I am Norlin Diaz. So my topic is about systematic violence and militarization against indigenous communities and their alternative education institution in Mindanao, Philippines. So this includes harassment and closure of Lumad school like MISFI and Al-Qadaf by armed men backed by village officials and the military. Destruction of school property and traumatization of indigenous children and teachers. So during that time, arson attacks on school facilities in Agusan del Sur. So extrajudicial killings of school and indigenous leaders, including the public execution of Al-Qadaf director and tribal leaders, which reflects grave human rights violations. So, the second topic is about systematic human rights violations against indigenous communities in Mindanao, particularly the Lumad, including extrajudicial killings, militarization, and displacement. So, with this, 71 indigenous leaders were extrajudicially killed during the Aquino administration. So 56 whom were Lumad children and civilians have also been victims, including documented killings by paramilitary groups and the military. So entire communities have been disrupted and displaced, with other 40,000 indigenous people affected. In violations include killings, harassment, military occupation of school and public facilities, and sexual violence. The third topic is about the forced displacement and violence against Lumad and the present communities due to militarization in Mindanao. So the passage highlights that execution of indigenous communities, Banwaon, Higaonon, and others due to military presence and violence. So assassination and massacres of community leaders and members, including Lumad and the peasant leaders. So the use of evacuation comes as a form of protest and survival, the role of state forces in perpetrating violence or enabling it, often linked to counterinsurgency effort. The fourth one is the targeted closure of Lumad schools and violence against indigenous leaders as a part of broader effort to suppress resistance to extractive industries. So this includes closure of Lumad school like Salumpungan and MISFI under military influence violates constitutional rights and that disrupts education. So this goal behind attacks on school and leaders is to awaken opposition to mining and agricultural expansion. So the last topic is about systematic exploitation and militarized displacement of indigenous communities in Mindanao driven by large-scale mining and agribusiness interests. So this presents that indigenous schools are essential for community cohesion and survival in remote areas. Yet, they're being close to weaken resistance and paramilitary groups open with indigenous members and legitimized by Executive Order number 264 are used to push corporate interest under the guise of counterinsurgency. So local officials and military act as a um, brokers facilitating land grabbing for mining and agricultural corporations. So the massive mineral wealth in Mindanao is gold, nickel, and foils. This violence and exploitation.
Good day, everyone. My name is Dave. So my topic is the 5 Manobo massacre by 1st Special Forces Battalion. It is a deeply disturbing and tragic narrative of what appears to be a violent encounter involving civilians and military forces in Pangantukan, Bukidnon. On August 18, 2015, it contains significant allegations of human rights violation, including extrajudicial killings, mistreatment of civilians, and intimidation of witnesses. So, the account of incident, on August 18, 2015, Herminio Samia, a 70 years old blind man, was at home sa Tumandong, Barangay Mindes, at Pangantukan, Bukidnon. Kauban niya ang mga pamilya, including his son, grandson, and nephews, and also 15-year-old na relative lang po nila. So, around 3 p.m., they heard gunfire coming from the forest. While his son suggested seeking safety, so Herminio insisted, say that believing they were just civilian with nothing to fear. At around 5 p.m., soldiers arrived and shouted for the people inside the house to come out, accusing them of being MPA rebels. Despite Herminio's blindness, the soldier forced him to come down, cursing at him in the process. After he struggled to descend, he was shot near a coffee tree. His nephew Emir was also shot, while the other were taken and later found dead. So the following day, 27 villagers, including a barangay councilor, visited the scene and were confronted by soldiers who photographed and listed their names. Warning them not to look at the military, they collected the bodies. So, the 5 victims were found in horrifying Herminio with his intestine exposed. So, si Emir dolra sa pertahan, and Norman with his iyang dalunggan cut off, and also young Joe is nabuakpod. So Wilmer with a disfigured face and severe hand, and also si Jorbert dolra pud kay Wilmer. So The soldiers ordered the resident to carry the bodies, to a hilltop for helicopter pickup. So, but due to the rain, the bodies were later taken to the barangay hall. So, this incident reflects a grave case of alleged military abuse and extrajudicial killings involving innocent civilians. And that's all.
In Wars of Extinction, Arnold highlights how Lumad communities in Mindanao face ongoing harassment and discrimination. One example is a solidarity mission supporting the Pangantukan 5, where participants were monitored by plainclothes agents forced to sign a logbook at a military roadblock. And later, the community was intimidated by the presence of military vehicles and soldiers. This incident shows how the state uses intimidation and fear to silence those seeking justice, reflecting the broader struggles of the Lumad against violence and displacement.